Hi, everyone. Magdalena here from Hormones Balance. We had a lot of questions about preserved lemons that I posted on Instagram and I posted it on Facebook. And with that, there was a lot of interest, but also a lot of questions. And I know many of you have started fermenting with us. And if you haven't, don't despair because I'm going to be starting a new batch as well. So it's all good. So I want to show you how simple it is. And why don't we just dive straight into it? There was quite a lot of questions that came up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start preparing things first. It's hard for me to look at the screen at the same time be answering questions. So Jean is here with us today, who's one of our customer support people and who takes care of you with all your questions. And so Jean is going to repose those questions for me on my Skype account. Let me make sure that I'm logged in. And from there, I'll make sure that I answer all your questions as you would need them. Okay. All right. So what's so cool about preserved lemons and actually I'm going to be making limes today just for a little bit of a variant because I really got a big batch of lemons going on here. And I know some of you have already started doing it. So actually, why don't we just jump into the technique first and then I'm going to tell you there's obviously medical benefits behind them. Otherwise, I wouldn't be encouraging you to make them, right? At the same time, it's really as simple as you require two things. One is organic. I like to use organic because you're going to be eating the peel. So why would you want to be putting all these chemicals in your body, right? And if you cannot get organic, then I would suggest to not to make it or wait until the season comes and then probably like around spring and summer, there's a little bit more organic options. You're not going to be eating the inside of the lime. You're going to be eating the outside. The peel is what we are after, okay? So this recipe is as simple as using two things, and that is limes. And you can do exactly the same thing using lemons. I don't know about oranges. I was thinking about that as I went shopping. And I actually don't know the answer to that, whether oranges, maybe something to be tried. You could make a little tiny batch maybe of oranges or kumquats and see what that turns out to be like. Now, the peel is gonna completely change its form. It's gonna taste like something you have never tasted before. If you haven't had Moroccan tagine, if some of you have either been to Morocco or to what's the country next to it? I'm blanking out right now. Starts with a T. It's not Tanzania. Anyway, we'll come back. And this is a condiment, like the same way Americans are using ketchup on burgers. Moroccans cannot live without the preserved lemons because it's a beautiful condiment that's being put into what's called the chicken stew, which is also known as the chicken tagine, and every family has its own recipe. So why don't we just get started with it right away? And I want to just show you how simple this is. So I'm going to be making a small batch because you can see I've got already a big batch going on here. All you need is a clean jar. I like using glass all around, including a jar that has a glass topping. And these things really cost us a few dollars to get it. Now, the reason why I do not like to use mason jars, the ones from Ball, is because the salt is a corrosive, right? So if you use metal as a lid, you're gonna end up collecting rust, and that's not what we want in food. Absolutely not, right? So this is the best way. Now, if you have no choice, but you don't want to be investing in a jar like that, or you don't have access to one, you want to make it right away, then what I would suggest is I'm actually going to show you how to do this, what to do to isolate the salt from the lid. So why don't we just get started? And really, the first thing that we want to do is start. So the first thing is organic limes, which I have already pre-washed. And when I say washed, I use hot water because you don't want to use antimicrobial soap because we actually want the microbes. We just want to have the right kind of microbes. You're going to be essentially fermenting the food, and we don't want any water on it per se, not too much at least, so that they're all nicely dried up. And you just want to kind of disinfect them, if you will. But antimicrobial soaps just destroy everything, and you end up just having no microbes. And we need microbes for the fermentation to get started. Okay, so Let me zoom in on my hands, and that way you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. So what we're gonna do, the first thing is, okay, now the salt that I'm using is, I chose to go with pink Himalayan salt. And, I love any kind of sea salt is really wonderful. I'm shying away from the salts that are, coming from the ocean, just because there's so many plastic microparticles that have been found now when they look under the microscope. And because Himalayan salt comes from Himalayas, and a lot of it is coming from India and Pakistan, that salt, just the plastic hasn't made it there, right? Okay. I also do like to use salt from Sicily, because it is the sea, the Middle Eastern, the Mediterranean Sea, right, is actually fairly clean, and they don't have as much plastic problems as we have with the oceans. So anyway, whatever salt you're using, I think you're gonna be fine. It's just because you're really not gonna be consuming too much of that salt. Now, the salt has got two purposes. The first purpose is to keep the microbes in control. And the beautiful thing about salt is that, for example, E. coli would never survive with salt around. But on the other hand, it does allow the good microbes to prosper, and that's the reason why the fermentation will happen. For example, if you put in hydrogen peroxide, which kills everything, then you're never going to get a ferment going, right? But with salt, you will. The other thing that salt is going to do is going to kind of eat up into the membranes and kind of get them to eat them up, if you will, and that's what's going to change the texture of the peel and make it edible and actually quite delicious. Okay. Have you ever tried red mint salt? Somebody's asking. Yes, in fact, I have it right there on the counter. I just didn't bring it over. Red mint comes from Utah, so that's really not a great deposit, and that's a great question, and that's a really, really good idea you can use red mint as well, because that's, again, is similar. It's salt deposits that haven't been polluted, so really good point. Now, let me zoom in on my hands again, and I don't know if you can see well, but I'm using not the super fine salt. You can use it, but the reason why I kind of like to use, it's not the biggest coarse, it's like the medium coarse sea salt, pink Himalayan sea salt, is because when it's too fine, it kind of goes all over the place. And that's for that reason I prefer to use it a little bit bigger, because it's just easier to work with it. It doesn't kind of go into every crevices everywhere. So to start off with, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to place some salt into the bottom of the jar. And the salt is also going to withdraw a lot of the juice from the limes. And you will see that in a second. Now, the second thing you want to do, let me zoom in on my hands. The second thing we're going to do is you're going to be cutting can you see this is where the lime was hanging off the branch, right? So this is where we're going to be cutting into, but we're not going to be quartering them completely. We're still going to be allowing the lime to hold its structure. So there we go. Do it in 4, but you can see that they are still connected at the bottom here, okay? And so the next thing we're going to do is, I hope you can see that, what I'm doing. Let me just see if I can. How much salt, somebody's asking. The thing is that actually it doesn't really, I'm going to be showing you how much salt. So start off with a whole bunch of salt. And then you will, depending on how big, of course, you're making it, right? Like here, I use a lot of salt because it's a big guy. By the way, I'm also using this for presents. It's going to be as gifts, not just for me, because this is going to take me like probably a year and a half or 2 years to go through it. It's just a condiment. Anyway, so let me go back to, so you're basically opening this up like a flower, right? And the next thing we're going to do is put your fingers in the salt. And by the way, in my kitchen, I just put my fingers into my salt. I don't really care because it's just me in the house. If you're squeamish, then just use a spoon. But the thing is that in the salt, in this environment, microbes actually don't really survive, the bad ones. So, unless you've got dirty fingers with fish or whatever. So you're basically covering it up, so all the crevices are kind of filled up. Not entirely, but it's basically, if you can see this, hopefully, let me see, yeah. So, and that's it. So then what we're gonna do is we're gonna place the lime at the bottom here of the jar, and let me use, and then you repeat the process. It goes really quickly from there. So again, we're gonna be putting a lot of salt in here. You know, it's really not complicated. So, oh, don't overthink it. There's no need to micromanage it and be too obsessed about you know, how much salt and how much. If you're doing it for the first time, it might be a little intimidating. So as you can see, I used today just a very small jar just to show you. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use half of another lime because this jar is just too small to have anything else, and it's fine to cut them in half as well. It's more of a traditional thing to keep it. I'm just gonna do this, and we do want to fill up the jar as much as possible because we want to eliminate the amount of water that's in there. So another thing is you're gonna do, especially if you're making a bigger batch, like the way I've made it here, you know, in this big one, is that you're layering salt. And so how much salt, you know, it's just to a point where it's slightly covered, right? But you're not filling up the whole thing with salt, okay? The thing is that you can't really oversalt it per se because you're not gonna be really eating the salt. Whatever, you know, the fruit, which is the lemon or the lime, is only gonna take so much salt, right? It can only absorb so much salt. So if it's too much salt, it doesn't really matter. Now, later today, if you just give it another couple of hours, you will see there's gonna be a lot of juice that's gonna be start coming out of it, right? So just for demo purposes, what I'm gonna do, let me just move things away. I've already got some lime juice squeezed up, and what we're gonna then do is, you know, most likely, that's why I always have these extra limes here, because most of the time you're not gonna produce enough juice to submerge your limes or your lemons, right? It's exactly the same technique. In case you're coming in late, the technique I'm using for limes is gonna be exact same technique you're gonna be using for lemons. So you're gonna see there's gonna be juice that's gonna start coming up, but it might cover it to probably about a half or maybe a third. So you end up having to top up with some freshly squeezed either lime juice if you're using limes or lemon juice if you're using lemons, right? So I've already got mine pre-squeezed, and just gonna cover them all up and add a little bit more salt on top. As you can see, I'm totally improvising. And here's, I've got a yellow jacket right here flying around. All right, now, so what's important is this. What you don't want is, we don't want any limes to be, you know, you can't really see it here, I think, but you don't want any fruit to be sticking out. So make sure that you cover it sufficiently with juice. And we're gonna have more juice coming out because I didn't wait, right, for the demo purposes here. But make sure that when you're finishing yours, like the same way I'm doing it with my lemons, there's always gonna be sufficient, so it's completely submerged. Now, one little trick I wanna show you when it comes to fermenting, and the lemons are already beginning to change structure. I'll show you that in a second, actually. One of the things I want to show you, a little trick, is using this glass jar, just a little tiny one like this. You can get it for like, you know, $1.50 on Amazon. Hello, Yellow Jacket. You are in trouble. And then what you can do is, with this jar, it might be too high, right? But on a bigger jar like this, so if you're using a 1-quart mason jar, then you can just press this down, and again, because it's glass, so nothing is going to happen. So it's all nice and healthy. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to basically close this up and open this up. There's going to be a little bit of gas, so carbon dioxide is going to be produced. It's not normal and natural, the same way. For those of you who have made sauerkraut before, you know it's very normal. So you want to pop it every few days. Really good practice is to have a little label on your somebody's asking about benefits. Who is this? Nis. Yeah, I'll talk about this in just a second. Really great question. Make sure you label it so you remember. And it takes about 30 days for the fermentation to happen. Sometimes I keep it going for as long as 45 days to 60 days. And your gauge is how the skin, how the peel, how soft it is, and the flavor that it has. I know if you haven't tasted it before, so it's hard for you to know it. So get it going for like 30 days to 40 days, and you will see. So let me just show you my lemons. Now, the lemons, I started making them on the 23rd of November. Okay, so today is the 30th of November, so 7 days ago, a week. And I want to just show you how it's already changing. Let me do a little zoom in on the video. Let me just, my hands are a little wet, so it's not responding. Okay, so hopefully you can see better. So this is a lemon. You can see, first of all, it's very soft. It's beginning to really soften. And the skin is beginning to be significantly softer as well. And it's becoming a little bit paler, okay? So that's it. I'm going to put that right back. And we had questions about, you know, like, what do you mean by turning in a recipe on my website? By the way, Jean, would you mind just popping the recipe from our website onto the comments so that our ladies can see the actual instructions? And in the recipe, I wrote there to turn the jar once in a while upside down. Now, you don't have to do this and leave it. No, it just means just to distribute in case the salt sits to the bottom. You know, if it's, then you just basically giving a bit of a stir, and then you want to pop it, like I said, so that the gas escapes, and always make sure that it's submerged. Okay, so I'm going to come to your questions in just a second. And what I'm going to do right now is let me talk about the amazing benefits. Like, why are we doing this, right? First of all, I want to assure you, you know, I noticed in developed countries, we've lost the art of fermentation, and so much so that some people are scared of fermenting because it's, you know, it might be equated to like allowing the food to rot, right? Makes sense. Except that if you know what you're doing, if you're controlling the fermentation process by using things like salt, then you're reducing, I mean, the possibility of getting yourself poisoned is almost nil, unless you choose to eat a fermented food that's completely rotten and it's got like black and green and red mold on it. Right? Then I think common sense will tell you, do not eat food like that. So the benefits of fermented lemons and limes, in culture they've been in many countries, I'll tell you about this in a second, is two things. The first thing is that they're highly alkalizing. You guys probably already know about lemons, like having a lemon water first thing in the morning before a meal alkalizes the body. People who are big proponents of alkalizing the body will tell you that cancer doesn't grow in an alkaline environment in the body. Disease doesn't develop as quickly. People don't have candida. For example, I remember doing an experiment once. I had this bout of candida, yeast overgrowth, right? And I drank just a teaspoon of baking soda, which is hugely alkalizing, right? I mean, hugely. And I drank that, and I did a strep test. You know how you can pee on a strep and then see your pH of your body. I mean, my pH dropped, increased from like 5.5 to 6.2 within literally 2 hours, right? So lemons have this alkalizing effect. This is number one. Number two that I love about them is the fact that the peel of lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruits, all that citrus fruit actually, contains this amazing substance called d-limonene. And d-limonene is hugely supportive for the liver. So for those of you who followed me for a while, you know that the liver is instrumental in helping us detoxify us from what I call dirty hormones, especially with estrogen. And you know, anybody who's struggling with estrogen issues such as lumpy boobs, terrible PMSs, infertility issues, endometriosis, thyroid nodules are estrogenic. Guess what? Estrogen receptor positive breast cancers, right? Uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, fibroids grow because of estrogen, because of the dirty estrogens. That's part of the beauty of these lemons, and d-limonene per se, specifically as a substance, is it helps us to detoxify the liver. So is that the only thing you can be doing to support your liver? No, of course not. There's a lot of other things that we can do, and I actually teach about that in our online cooking program, how to support your hormones with the right diet. In fact, Jean, why don't we pop in the cookingforbalance.com URL so that for those of you who haven't done the free workshop yet, just take the workshop. It's an online one, so you can take it from anywhere in the world and learn, foods like this and more can really support your hormones. by rebalancing your gut health, by rebalancing, supporting detoxification of your liver. You know, just to share with you, about 7 years ago, I started having a lot of hair loss problem, and it wasn't because of the thyroid. And I went to see a functional doc, and she was so good in identifying right away. She said, you know, I think you're having estrogen dominance. And so I remember doing a lot of research, and before I dove into supplements like DIM or sulforaphane that really help to detoxify us from estrogens, I thought, you know, all I'm going to do is just support my liver naturally first and see what happens. And I did a lot of lemons and limes, alkalizing the body, also using the peel, but also then added in things like flaxseed, you know. And literally within a month, I went back to retest. And the test that I did was the 2 to 16 hydroxyextron, which basically 2 and 16 are metabolites. One of them is protective. The 16 is very antagonistic, and that's the one that causes the growth of a lot of the malignant tissue that I talked about. Sorry, my microphone is popping. And so, yeah, so you really, you know, don't take the power of food for granted. This is chemistry, and it can really make a profound difference in your own health. All right, let me pop over to the questions and see what you guys have, what you guys are saying. And this is gonna be fun. So who here is going to make it? Who here is gonna make the lemons or limes? I'm very curious. And let me also talk about, let me see whether if I can see your questions. Let me also talk about what do you do with this condiment, right? So now you make it, and now what, right? So my team actually and I are developing a whole bunch of new recipes for you so that you can see how to add them into the different foods that you make on a daily basis. But basically, if you just look up Moroccan chicken stew, it's called tagine, T-A-J-I-N, or it's also sometimes spelled as T-A-G-I-N. Then you will see this is a staple. This is the ketchup for the Moroccans, right? And in India, in Thailand, in Taiwan, actually, for those of you who don't know me that well, I actually grew up in Southeast Asia. So I spent 22 years of my life living in Asia, all the most formative years. And that's where I picked up on a lot of the cues, how food and medicine really kind of merge in Asia, you know. And one of the things that they use these little tiny limes to ferment them. And whenever you come down with a cold, they would crush it. So after fermenting it for 30 days or so, they will crush it in the glass, add a little bit of honey and sparkling water. And that's one of the most refreshing drinks you can have that calms the tummy, but also helps your immune system. So we're going to be developing a whole bunch of recipes, but like right off the bat, I can tell you, if you just look up that Moroccan tagine, it's another really wonderful dish. You know, you can start it off in a slow cooker, right? So you put everything in a slow cooker, go to work, come back, and the meal is ready. Another way to do this is to take the condiment and just chop it up very finely and then add it to your salads. In fact, you see my cookbook up there on the shelf, right? In the cookbook, there's a whole bunch of recipes using preserved lemons, including tapenade, which is, you know, is basically your olives that are cut up like a paste that is made with, and olives are combined with something acidic like lemons. It's just a wonderful way of adding a little bit of zest to your tapenade. Let's see what else. And then there's a mayo recipe in the cookbook. You can use it that way. You can make a drink out of that. So stay tuned. We're going to be developing a lot of new recipes. And if you're not on my mailing list, just go to hormonesbalance.com, hormones with an S, hormonesbalance.com, and join us there to see what's going on. What about acid in the teeth, on your teeth? I mean, look, this is like the biggest myth I think I've ever heard of people going, it's gonna destroy my teeth and all that. I have never met a person who had the teeth destroyed from eating or drinking lemon juice. I mean, look, this food has been used for generations. You know, it's in Moroccan tradition. It's in that's the kind of looking for. Oh no, really. And And so there's just so much in Thailand and Taiwan. Like I said, there is whenever there is a tradition of a certain food, I always have a lot of respect for it because there's a reason why it's there. So nothing that you should be worried about. Um, Yuri is saying she will try oranges and grapefruit. I do have citrus tree. That's awesome. That's wonderful. Yeah. So Jean, I can't see the rest of the comments, unfortunately. There's very limited that I can see while the live transmission is going on. Can you pop the questions into Skype so I can take a look and see what other good questions that we have? What do you do to keep the salt from the metal lid? So I already explained that at the beginning. So once you hang up, watch the video again. I already explained how to do that. Is it okay for the jar to open every so often to check the softness of the lemon? Absolutely, yes. You should be doing that. Like I mentioned, popping it occasionally is really good to release the gas. And yeah, so and then just give it a little bit of a shake like this, you know. Okay, so I think we're good. All right, you guys. Well, I hope this was helpful for today, and I really hope that many of you will try this because it is so transformative. Whenever I make a dressing, and so like a simple dressing of olive oil, I put a bit of salt, I put in a fermented, so the preserved lemon into it, right? And serve it with a salad. It's a simple salad like a arugula and just maybe a few cucumbers and serve that. People always go like, wow, what's the taste? Like it's tangy, but it's different. And that's really what it is. You're gonna transform the food to something so unusual. So I hope this was helpful today. And we're going into the weekend, so head out there, get some organic lemons, limes, and get started. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching today, and I'll see you next week.